To answer the question posed in the title of this video, yes, Rez is Gex's father, and here's why. Hello and welcome to the first video in a series that I am calling Digital Deductions. The point of the series is to investigate and possibly solve some ongoing mysteries in media. Currently my focus is on video games, but I am willing to open it up to other forms of entertainment such as movies, TV, and the internet. This might be a flash in the pan series as I really only have inspiration and ideas for this video and maybe one more. But if this series proves to be popular enough and there's enough demand, I will consider doing it regularly. Anyhow, on with the first mystery of this series, the true identity of Gex's rival. To clarify though, this isn't quite as mysterious as I'm making it out to be. Most of the information I'm about to go over has been laid out on the Gex wiki, and I have seen people talk about this online, mostly on Twitter, but most people are still either unaware or don't believe this. Matter of fact, the Gex wiki entry openly disregards this as a retcon. So, I am simply going to state my case for why I firmly believe Rez is Gex's father. For those that are unaware, allow me to fill you in. Gex Gecko was a 3D platforming mascot during the mid to late 90s. He was an anthropomorphic gecko with a distinct interest in television and loved to make references to pop culture regularly. This in turn made for some interesting games, as it was the only game series at the time to poke fun at pop culture and have levels based around certain genres of TV. Gex became very popular during his time in the gaming industry and cemented himself as Crystal Dynamics' mascot until that was later dethroned by Lara Croft from Tomb Raider. Although, as those of you that have played the games are well aware, the true origin behind Gex's obsession with TV is a lot more darker than it seems on the surface. The origin story of Gex is probably the most darkly comedic one that's ever been given to a 3D platforming character. Matter of fact, the game for the first manual goes into great detail about the origins of Gex and how it all led up to the first events of the game. But to save you some time, I'm just going to give you the gist of it. Basically, Gex lived a carefree and happy life with his family on Maui, Hawaii. This was until one fateful day when his father, who worked for NASA, was picked amongst 10 other volunteers to eat tapioca pudding in zero gravity. Unfortunately, things would go horribly wrong when the rocket that Gex's father and the other volunteers are on would explode due to a band-aid floating in the fuel tank. Did I mention that this story is darkly comedic? The death of his father would devastate Gex, so much so that he would go from being an outgoing, happy-go-lucky gecko to a shut-in with the unhealthy obsession for TV. And shortly after his father's passing, Gex would go on to lose another family member, this being his great-uncle Charlie. Man, death just seems to follow Gex around, doesn't it? Although the death of Uncle Charlie would be spun to be more positive, because as it turns out, he used to be the original model of the Izod shirt logo, and as a result amassed a massive fortune. And as part of his will, he would leave his entire estate to Gex's family, and each family member would go on to buy various luxurious items with their cut of the share. And with his cut of the share, Gex would go on to buy the largest house on Maui, fill it with the world's largest TV set, and with enough food to last him decades. He would promptly seal himself inside from the outside world, and would go on to fulfill his lifelong dream of watching television 24/7. And sometime after this is when the events of the first game take place, with a mysterious villain named Rez snatching Gex through his television set with intents of forcing him to be the mascot of his new TV network. Alright, you're all caught up on the backstory of Gex, but how exactly does this mean that Rez is Gex's father? Gex's father clearly died, and if Rez was Gex's father, wouldn't Gex know about it? Well, that's where things get interesting. By the way, spoilers from here on out I guess, even though Gex isn't really a story-driven series, despite the fact that the creators went to an absurd length to explain Gex's love of television. But, well, if you feel differently, then, well, you've been warned. But before we dive into this crazy theory of mine, we first have to go to the source of where this correlation came from in the first place. And I'm sure it's pretty obvious where I'm starting. That's right, the ending to Gex Enter the Gecko, the second game in the series. After Gex defeats Rez, Rez offers a peculiar exchange with our hero. I'll play the clip so you can see for yourself.
Gex, it is me, your father.
Yeah, right. How can you be my father?
It's true. I didn't always look like this. I fell into a scrap heap while trying to get free cable.
I am your father. Bit of a curious thing to say after your arch nemesis has beaten you, isn't it? Of course, most Gex fans are familiar with this ending and have largely written it off as a Star Wars joke. Although, rewatching this ending, I'm not so sure that it is a joke. For one, the delivery is all off. It's like Rez is actually admitting that he is Gex's father. Plus, the bit about him talking about his appearance would be a weird thing to tack onto the end of a Star Wars joke. I suppose what you could say Rez is really doing here is simply begging for his life and looking for any reason for Gex not to kill him. Not that Gex actually does. Rez comes back in Gex 3, don't worry. But still, Rez tries to find some sort of reason for Gex not to turn off the TV he's trapped inside. This argument does hold some water, considering right after Rez admits to being Gex's father, he later tries to bribe him with a possible meeting with Quentin Tarantino through his gardener's fiancée. However, in the special US ending that's unlocked by completing the game 100%, Gex would do a spoof of David Letterman's late night top 10 list called
The Top 10 Reasons Why It's Cool to Be Me, Gex.
In it, he would make reference to Rez's claim about being his father.
Number 5. Dad is a megalomaniac TV killer who happens to dress like the Tin Man.
As you can see, this is obviously played for laughs, but it is an odd coincidence that this same sort of joke will be made in the same game twice. It's almost like the developers are trying to tell us something. Or they just need to pad out a top 10 list. You be the judge of that. Okay, moving on from Enter the Gecko, this wouldn't be the last time this correlation is made. As a matter of fact, the Gex novelization that was published in 2000 would revisit this origin story. In it, they provide a very different and much darker take on Rez's origin story. Luckily for you, your boy owns a copy of the Gex novel, because I guess I love throwing my money away, I guess. So I will do my best to try and read this to you. Forgive me if my narration isn't the best. So this scene in the novel pretty much follows up with the ending of the second game. However, when Rez goes to reveal his identity, he offers a very different explanation, and this is where we pick up. "Listen to me, Gex," Rez said, his hands pressed against the inside of the screen. "I have something to tell you." "I'm listening," Gex said. "What's the hurry? You're not going anywhere." "Gex," Rez began, "I am your father." Now that I was not expecting. "But Mom told me you were dead," I replied, hiding my shock. "No, I wasn't killed in that NASA accident," Rez explained. "I was just hideously deformed, and it made me hateful. I will rule all the TV, and you won't stop me." So in this alternate version of Rez's revelation, we're given a more Darth Vader-esque backstory. Gex's dad was an honest and respected member of the community until his inevitable disfigurement, which caused him to grow bitter and hateful towards the world around him. Much like Anakin Skywalker, he felt he had lost everything in that moment. At least in his mind, he thought. So he constructs this metal suit to hide his disfigurements and possibly help keep him alive, and turns to a life of villainy to take over the media dimension. And honestly, I kind of like this origin story better in a way. It gives Gex's dad a more plausible reason to turn evil in the way he does. Because, we don't know much about Gex's dad, but we're relieved to think that he was at least a decent guy. So it doesn't make sense that he would just turn to being evil at the drop of a hat just because he's disfigured. But I will give credit to the original backstory in Enter the Gecko. It was more original and a lot funnier. But I'm sure some of you are already disregarding this information saying, "Oh, come on, that's just the Gex novel. That thing definitely isn't canon, right?" And yes, the Gex novel isn't canon. His particular origin story of Rez hasn't been confirmed as canon at all, and this book isn't even written by one of the game's developers. But the fact that the author went to the trouble of including the same sort of reference some odd years after the release of Enter the Gecko speaks volumes to me. Seems like there's definitely something more going on here than just a Star Wars reference. Finally, I want to turn to my final piece of evidence, and what I believe to be the smoking gun in my case for Rez being Gex's father. All the evidence I've provided thus far could be easily argued against, but I think with this additional piece of evidence, it becomes a lot harder to deny Rez's fatherhood. This evidence can be seen in the PS1 ending of Gex 3 Deep Cover Gecko. After Gex saves the day once again, him and his lady friend Agent Extra decide that they need a little, R&R, we'll call it. And as Extra gives her experience in Rez's captivity, Gex offers a peculiar response to her story. Have a listen.
And then, after he showed me his entire collection of Star Trek bloopers, he asked me to marry him. Actually, he insisted.
That's my dad. That's my dad.
That's my dad. There you have it. Gex himself confirms it. He acknowledges Rez as being his previously deceased father. Now I'm sure some of you detractors are going to write this off as a sarcastic callback to the previous game, but I wouldn't write this off so quickly. First of all, if this is Gex being sarcastic, then delivery's all off. If you're being sarcastic, he'd be more like, "That's my dad," instead of, "Yeah, that's my dad." Almost like Gex is jokingly agreeing with her that that's something that his father would do. So I don't think Gex is being sarcastic. You can argue otherwise, but at that point you're questioning the great Dana Gold's legendary performance of Gex. And honestly, do you really want to be that guy? Also, of all the things for Gex to reference from the previous game, the whole dad bit seems a little bit weird to me. But hey, maybe that's just me. In any case, no matter what you think, I think all signs clearly point to Rez being Gex's father. And for those reasons, I can confidently say, Rez, you are the father. I just find it peculiar that with Gex clearly aware of his dad's resurrection, pun intended, that he just simply doesn't care. Again, his father's death was the thing that transformed Gex into the Gecko that we know today. So to see him disregarded like it's nothing is kind of amusing in a way. I mean, I guess he's a supervillain now, but come on, man, he's still your dad. And as a quick little bonus to end this video on, I wanted to go over one more theory that's sort of tied into this one. Throughout the series, every time you defeat Rez, he'd seem to shrink into this little ball of light and then fly away. And people have speculated that this little ball of light is Rez's life force flying off to reincarnate himself. This sort of explains how every time Gex defeats Rez, he just keeps coming back. However, a curious detail from the final boss battle in Gex 3 is that once you defeat Rez, this little ball of light doesn't appear. This has led many people to believe that this, coupled with the fact that this was essentially the last game in the series, that Rez died at the end of Gex 3. Now, do I think that's the case? No, I don't think so. For one, I would hope it isn't, since canonically Gex knows that Rez is his father. So it'll be pretty dark and messed up for him to kill his own father, even if he is a supervillain. Plus, there's evidence that Gex 4 was in development for the PS2, and with Rez being the huge bad guy in the series, and Gex being a series that could care less about plot holes, I don't see why they wouldn't bring him back. I mean, having a Gex game without Rez is kind of like having a Mario game without Bowser. It's not impossible, but it's very unlikely. So there, Rez is Gex's dad, and he didn't die at the end of Gex 3. You're welcome. Anyhow, let me know what you think about these theories in the comments down below. Is Rez really Gex's long-lost dad? Are you skeptical if he's telling the truth? Did Rez really die at the end of Gex 3? Does any of this actually matter? Probably not, but it's fun to discuss. Anyways, thank you all for listening to me ramble about Gex for 20 minutes. I appreciate it, and I'll catch you in the next video. Peace out, little lizards.